Okay, I've started recording. So normally we would do a technical cybersecurity IT service related webinar. Those are our typical ones. During this particular pandemic, this crisis, this that we're working toward recovering from. We're on a road to recovery, I like to say. And so we've now bifurcated our webinar series, where on Tuesdays we'll do technical and security and other related things. We actually have a really interesting one coming up this Tuesday, where we've been able to use some of our vendors to offer out some things to our community. And so we'll be giving some free things away. But on Thursdays, we're going to bring in people like John Dos Reis we have today, who are experts in particular fields that relate to what we're going through today. What's a particular note in what we're going through today is particularly relative to the stimulus bill that just passed, and John will be speaking to the Paycheck Protection Program amongst other funding sources. But all of the experts that we bring in on Thursdays will be speaking specifically about the different things that we need to look out for in their fields and disciplines to make sure that we are able to get through this and recover through this as healthily as possible. One of the things to make note of, yes, we are holding this on a Zoom, as you can tell because you've joined, and also Zoom has been in the headlines as of late, particularly because they've had a few breaches, and you know we're a cybersecurity company, and breaches are top of mind for us routinely. One of the things that, I think it was the FEC or the FCC is investigating them and their lack of security. So nothing to really worry about. Where those breaches have been coming from is that they don't encrypt end-to-end, and then people have been able to interject themselves into Zoom meetings. The world is on Zoom today, needless to say, so they're a primary target. I like to say the world is on vacation as opposed to saying that we're in a panic. And so with the world on vacation, everybody is streaming and everybody's doing things like Zoom and Teams and a variety of other things. So naturally, these services are going to be the target of hackers. The good news is that Zoom has paused all development and are focusing all of their efforts on ensuring that their product and their service is encrypted end-to-end as quickly as humanly possible, and making sure that there are no issues with their service. So on the good news front of that is that Zoom is on top of it, and they're paying attention to it. And they're not doing that because the government told them so. They understand that their explosive growth requires them to be a good steward of people's data. So that's good news on their front. To be fair to them also, there is no such thing as perfect security, and every platform has its holes. Anybody who's seen me do a presentation where I've done a live hack has seen me break into almost any system. And so there's no such thing as perfect security. Good news again, Zoom is paying attention to that. Anyway, I want to jump right into what the topic is at hand. I'm really happy that John's able to join us. I've known John now for several years. He is, I don't want to get his head too big, but he's a really good guy and smart as hell on the financial side of life. John is managing partner of Martin DeCruz and Company. They're a boutique CPA firm. They provide consulting services, income tax prep, audit and attestation services to businesses and individuals. And John's been at this quite some time. And what I happen to like the most about John is that he knows his stuff, but he doesn't speak like a typical accountant. He speaks like everybody else. So even I can understand him. So if I can understand him, he's got to be speaking like everybody else. So I don't want to waste any more of your time, and I'd like to introduce and join me in welcoming John Dos Reis.
Thanks, Al. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone's well and managing to keep things afloat and working through all the challenges. Hopefully this will provide some insight on some of the new programs and opportunities for businesses to benefit from all the different programs that the government is pushing out to help with these difficult times. As is, usually when these programs get pushed out, The details are lacking. The interpretation can be challenging. They're not always clear as day. And a lot of times these things get resolved over time, and a better understanding of them comes with time. And errors are just kind of the learning curve. Banks are struggling trying to understand what the process is to process these loans, and payroll services as well. So it's all ever evolving. Things are changing day to day. So as of today, hopefully this is some information that helps point you in the right direction, gives you an idea of what's out there and how it can help you. We have been working on staying up to date on all these issues as they have been evolving. Both trying to understand the issues ourselves, as well as with other affiliate firms that we work with and partner with, to try to interpret all these issues that are coming out. So to get started, again, we're going to focus on the PPP program, but I'll probably touch on a couple of issues. Here is a chart of just some of the different things and programs that have become available as part of all the relief. Obviously, there's the SBA loans, which we'll talk about, including the PPP, the Payroll Protection Plan. There are payroll tax credit programs whereby a business is eligible for a $5,000 payroll tax credit per employee, up to being paid $10,000 during 2020. So for every employee, there is an opportunity to claim a payroll tax credit of $5,000 that would offset your employer tax liability. And just getting ahead of things, if you were to file for the PPP loan program, you would not be eligible for both that and the $5,000 per employee credit. So that's something to consider as you evaluate what program or opportunities best fit your company's needs. Also, in relation to payroll, the IRS is allowing companies to defer the payment of certain employer taxes, not the withholdings from employees, but the Social Security portion of the payroll tax expense of an employer. So that's 6.2% per employee. There is an ability to defer those payments and to later years, which could obviously help significantly with cash flow, in these current times. There are some retention credits. There's obviously, expanded unemployment programs that include self-employed or contractors, which otherwise typically aren't available. So those are just different opportunities to try to, that you may want to look into and get comfortable with, and see if that's something that you could take advantage of one way or the other. So again, going more into the loans, there's basically two different loan programs that exist. The original program was the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. More recently, passed last week, was the SBA 7. That's the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. Just touching on both quickly. Economic Injury Disaster Loan, it's for companies with 500 or less employees. At 500 or less, if you're on the border, it's important that you understand the rules. A lot of the different legislation out there has a different interpretation of what qualifies as a full-time equivalent employee. Obviously, if you're nowhere near that, you don't have to worry about it. Typically, it would be 30 hours or more. But if you are hovering around that area, you want to be careful to look at the code that specifically relates to each program, because they are using different interpretations of full-time equivalent employees.
John, a quick question for you, if I might. Some colleagues of mine the other day had asked specifically about that, and would 1099s count if they were principally engaged by the company as an employee under that? Well, do you know?
Right. And well, our understanding at this point, along with, again, we are an affiliate member of BDO, and that understanding also at this time is that you would not, again, I think that falls more in hand with 7A loan program and constituting what your payroll is. And it's our understanding that a contractor, unless you had a regular recurring contractor that is coming into work every day, that's not payroll. And if you are treating that as payroll, as a 1099 as opposed to payroll, that opens a whole door to potential problems. Most contractors or self-employed individuals are able to apply for the 7A program individually. So I think they would be entitled to benefits individually. The employer looking to benefit from the program, it's our understanding that those payments to contractors should not be included in the payroll calculation.
Okay, I appreciate that. And another question was about the owner. I'm assuming the owner's pay counts. What about an owner's draw?
Well, the basis for owners, self-employed individuals, or partners, okay? So basically, if you're not a C Corp or an S Corp on salary, if you're a partner or a self-employed individual or a contractor, again, self-employed individual, I would think of that as a self-employed person with employees versus a subcontractor, which may be someone that receives 1099s. The allowable inclusion would be up to $100,000.
Up to $100,000, you said?
Based on $100,000 per partner or self-employed individual. So if your self-employment income exceeds the $100,000, you would use $100,000. If it's less than $100,000, then obviously you would use something that represents the actual amount.
Okay, so if they're self-employed and they're drawing up to $100,000, you would include up to that. Anything over $100,000 would not be included.
And again, I wouldn't necessarily say the word drawing, because a self-employed individual, the income of that individual is the income of the entity, right? So whether they draw or not, it's determined by the net income of the entity.
Oh, I see. Okay, so in a self-employed, the entity itself, its net income is what's deciding that, correct?
Right, because that's ultimately the income of that self-employed individual. It's not necessarily what they draw out.
Okay, see what happens when I try to get into your space? That's why I don't even belong being in the CPA. Okay, don't let me interrupt you anymore. Go ahead.
So for a partner or a self-employed individual, the draw really means nothing. You could work all year, make $500,000 and not draw a dollar from the business. You're still required to report that $500,000 in your income, right, on your personal 1040, and that would be, in theory, equivalent to a salary, right? Whether or not you draw, so it's all about self-employed income. So just kind of circling back, the economic injury disaster loan up to $2 million, interest rate fixed 3.75%, payable for a term up to 30 years. And that program there's 0% of that program is eligible for forgiveness. But there is a provision of that program that allows for businesses to request a $10,000 loan that would not have to be repaid. And that's available to small businesses, and that's something that small businesses should be looking at. It's that program can be applied for online at sba.gov. And there is an opportunity as you apply for the EIDL program to request a $10,000 loan that would not have to be repaid. So that's a great opportunity, and I think something that could be revisited with the PPP program. There's, I think questions whether or not a single business could benefit from both. At this point, we don't see anything that says they cannot, but just something to be aware of. And again, this slide simply summarizes that EIDL loan program. Again, the $2 million, 3.75, 500 or less employees. There's a link to some more information. What those funds can be used for, which is essentially everyday operations of the business. And that's the EIDL loan. Again, just it's pretty relatively based on FICO credit score of the owners, no prepayment penalties, personal guarantees only when the loan is greater than $200,000. Collateral may or may not be required depending on the amount of the loan. And here is, again, that new quick $10,000 amount, which will be forgiven. Otherwise, no forgiveness for amounts over that $10,000. And here, just some information on some changes. They've streamlined the process of getting a loan. They're trying to make it easier. Again, that $10,000 emergency advance that doesn't have to be repaid. This is all guaranteed by the SBA. All right, this is, now let's move on to, I think, the kind of highlight, the Paycheck Protection Program. So maximum loan amount up to 10 million, but it's capped for each entity at 2.5 times the average total monthly payroll costs. And that is kind of the basis for your loan amount. So companies will need to compute that number. What is the average monthly payroll cost? As of now, the current guidance says that companies would rely on their 2019 total payroll and compute an average. In that amount, you would include gross salaries, state unemployment insurance costs, that payroll tax, not other payroll taxes, but that one you can. Health insurance costs that the employer pays for, net of obviously any employee contributions to the cost. So if the employer is paying $1,000 a month for an employee, but withholding half of that from the employee, then obviously their net cost would only be the half. So health insurance, dental insurance, if you have a 401k plan, you're making a match or some other kind of retirement savings contribution, those items would be included. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Department website has a great pamphlet a very simple pamphlet on how you can compute those numbers. And it's important that you're careful in doing so. What's going to be a challenge is for employees earning over $100,000, you have to take out any excess over the $100,000. So if you've got someone earning 120, 100,000 of that would qualify towards the total in coming up with their average, just like a partner or self-employed individual. Or obviously it's the lesser of the amount. So if everyone in your company is making $100,000 or less, you don't have to deal with that computation, but if they're over, we're going to have to work through that. And there's very few demands on the borrower at this time. There are some confusion from the banks on what they need from the borrower to obtain and part of the application process. Some banks feel that it may only be 941 quarterly payroll returns and W-3s. Others are asking for much more extensive information, 3 years tax returns, personal financial statements, cash flow analysis. But we feel that those banks are asking for what the SBA would typically require for a loan program. However, this is meant to be a streamlined program and are inclined to believe that it may be the lesser. But at the same time, this program is not, there is no empty bucket. This will, there's a $249 billion budget for this. So once that's taken up, the program is over. So better again sooner than later, and better to kind of have everything lined up sooner than later in case your bank does require that, whether it's needed or not. But whoever you're using, obviously you've got to follow their requests.
So, John, let me ask you this question, a couple of questions. One, if I'm hearing you right, it's best if we shop around, so to speak. We go to multiple lending institutions today, because tomorrow's the opening day, and determine what their requirements are, since some may be more onerous than others, not because we couldn't provide the documentation, but because it just may take longer to provide a more robust application than a more streamlined one. Would that be an accurate statement, that we should shop it around?
You can shop it around. So what we're seeing is, and we have clients currently applying to the program, and they are submitting those applications, even though the technical starting date is April 3rd for small businesses and sole proprietorships that have employees, April 10th for independent contractors and self-employed individuals that don't have employees. What we're finding is the banks aren't overly excited about these programs. A huge burden. They're getting inundated with calls. There isn't a huge payoff for them. Chase Bank, for example, put out a statement that they're only processing these loans for business customers that existed in February. So if you're not with Chase, don't go to Chase. Other banks are looking for this to be an income producer and are accepting outside clients to process. So, I think what you need to do is obviously make sure that your bank is an SBA approved lender and that they can accept applications. Secondly, find out what they need from you or what they think they need from you. It could be more than actual, but you want to start lining those things up. And yeah, absolutely shop around. I mean, the terms are all the same. The interest rates are the same. Some banks may have more, be better equipped to manage the process. Some won't be. Some may have a better inside handle. We're finding that banks that are doing more SBA lending are obviously better equipped and have an inside track on everything. We received some early documentation from several clients that had SBA loans, and their SBA lenders were feeding them information, last week, a week ahead of everyone else. One bank that we know is accepting applications from non-affiliated businesses is Live Oak Bank.
I'm sorry, you broke up there. Who is that?
Live Oak Bank.
Live Oak Bank.
Correct.
Okay, so Live Oak Bank is accepting applications. I'm repeating that because you're breaking up a little bit there, but I just want to make sure that everybody can hear that. Live Oak Bank is accepting applications for more than just their depositors.
Correct.
Okay, just one quick question while I still have your attention. On the previous page, and we have a question on this. On the previous page, you had mentioned utilities. What constitutes utilities? Does the cell phone bills that we pay on behalf of our employees or ourselves, does that constitute a utility?
Yeah, our opinion of what constitutes a utilities are obviously gas, electric, telephone.
Okay, so that would include the cell phones that we either reimburse or directly pay for in support of the business.
Correct.
Okay. All right, good. And then just another quick question that I'm seeing. I'm going to ask these in line to be a little bit easier. Someone's applying for a loan, the disaster loan through SBA. Are they, I'm not really sure what the question is. I'm applying for a disaster loan also through the SBA. Is this okay? Am I permitted to do this? I'm not sure what that question's asking. Perhaps it's asking, can you do the loan and the paycheck protection? If you're doing the disaster loan and the payroll and the paycheck protection, is that possible? Can companies do that?
There hasn't been firm clarification on that. The paycheck protection program does have a question that asks whether the business has received SBA economic injury disaster loan between January 31st and April 30th. I'm sorry, April 3rd. So there's a question asking if you received some assistance, and yes or no, but it does not indicate that if you have or have not, that you wouldn't qualify for this program as well. I think you've got to check with your lenders on that.
So
if something becomes available.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I would say, based on the applications, I don't see anything that says you cannot. So I would say to go ahead and apply for both. Obviously, answer the questions appropriately, and I'd let the process play out. There isn't clarification that says you can or cannot apply for both. There is clarification that says you cannot take the employer tax credit, the $5,000 per employee, if you also obtain the PPP loan.
Okay, so that's actually very good information. So I'm gonna, in support of what you guys do over there, John, I'd strongly encourage everybody to, if you're going for these programs and if you get these programs, to speak to your CPA about how that affects your long-term tax filings.
Right, and something everyone should keep in mind is if anyone has any lines of credit, term loans with current banks, they want to make sure that, sometimes those agreements will have a covenant that indicates they can't obtain other financing without bank approval. So they also want, if anyone has any loans, lines of credit, they want to make sure that their bank would obviously waive any covenant restricting their ability to get additional financing without their approval. Now, we wouldn't think that a bank would, would have a problem with getting what could be free money, but that's something that everyone should consider. So just circling back, the application. Yeah, go ahead, Al.
So that's also good information. If people have an existing loan or an existing line of credit, would confirm that whether or not there's a clause stipulating they can't get credit and/or a loan elsewhere, and if there is, then they need to check with their bank. So I'm just reiterating what you said, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong. Would the Paycheck Protection Program, is that actually a loan, and does that constitute an additional form of quote-unquote financing under something like what you just talked about?
Well, it is languaged as a loan, even though obviously the ultimate intent or hope would that most or all of it would be forgiven tax-free. But it is languaged as a loan, and it could ultimately become a loan. There's
Okay.
all the identifiers of a loan. It's subject to interest rate. It's payable over a term. Obviously, again, the goal is to come up with an amount that ultimately, if the business completed its obligations, would translate to a grant and a cancellation of the loan. But it is a loan either way. So I would say yes, it would be one of those loans that you have to be careful doesn't violate an existing loan's covenant.
Okay. And then in terms of, because you had mentioned that, the intent is to either eventually forgive it, is any portion of it guaranteed to be forgiven? I'm just kind of summarizing a few questions that have been asked.
No, none of it. So let's just go, let's walk through a simple example. Your annual payroll is $1 million for a company. You have $200,000 of health insurance benefits. So in theory, hypothetically, your total payroll costs would be $1.2 million for the year. On average, that translates to $100,000 a month. So using the loan program, you could indicate that your average payroll costs are $100,000 a month, and that would qualify you for a $250,000 PPP loan. Okay, assuming that loan gets processed, once you receive the funds, there will be an 8-week window that will be evaluated at a later date, and you'll need to submit substantiation to indicate that you used that $250,000 for qualified expenses. Those expenses would include, obviously, payroll, the employee benefits. It would also include rent and utilities. Even though rent and utilities is not in the original calculation of the borrowing amount, it is part of the calculation for potential cancellation. So you'll need to substantiate that you spent the $250,000 on those different eligible expenses, and if you do, the thought is that this loan would be canceled. If you fall short for whatever reason, several of your employees, your rent and your salary does not cover the $250,000. Well, whatever's left is a loan, and it's payable back to the government at a 0.5% interest rate, which is very favorable, and it's due in 2 years. There's no prepayment penalty on the loan, so there's really no risk in getting the loan. Other expenses you could substantiate.
So a couple of questions on the. I'm sorry, John. I thought you were done. Please.
No, that's fine. Go ahead, Al.
Okay, just a couple of questions, and so I think you answered the question that a portion of the loan is not guaranteed forgivable, to answer somebody's questions. And that you also, just to confirm that included in those payroll expenses that you're going to, the annual payroll expenses that you're going to use to get your average payroll would include the health insurance that you're paying. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Health, dental, any type of pension or retirement, 401k contributions that you're making, those, and state unemployment insurance, that portion of the payroll tax.
So everything that, all of the benefits, quote unquote, that you're giving to your employees as part of their compensation package would be included in that calculation, plus the state payroll tax that you pay.
Correct. Which again, the state payroll tax is not significant. We're talking about it's a few $1,000s, but it is includable.
Right. I just want to make sure that I'm answering the questions, because several questions about
Yes.
what's included in calculating the payroll. So
Right.
I think that okay. Did I miss
Right.
anything in that? It was a broad
again,
statement, I know, but.
No, that's accurate. And again, if everyone could go to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce website, they have a 4-page pamphlet that is very helpful in seeing what this is. There's also a video. So that's they could reach out for those resources to get some clarification. But it is gross salary plus benefits, health, dental, 401k, retirement savings, any of those costs.
Okay. And I'm just going to keep asking a couple of these questions. I'm sorry, and then we can.
Sure.
But I do want to let everybody know we're going to wrap it in
Go for it.
about 10 minutes. So I know that we'll end a little bit early because John does have work to do. If an amount is forgiven, because the loan has a mature, it's a loan, like you said, there's an interest rate attached to it, there's a maturity date attached to it. If an amount is forgiven, some or all of it, is any interest accrued on that forgiven amount also forgiven, or it does interest accrue and does it become payable? So, for instance, if you get $1 million loan and they forgive $500,000 of that loan, and would the interest accrued on the $500,000, would that be forgiven, or is that due and owing?
No, it's our understanding that the interest would only begin on the unforgiven balance. Would only apply to on any amount that's not forgiven.
Okay. And then one last question that I have on the income side, if income is taken as a year-end balloon as opposed to on a monthly basis, it's still the annual income that gets used to calculate the average monthly. Is that correct?
Well, the income is not what's used to calculate the average monthly. It's payroll.
Okay, I meant payroll. My apologies.
Gross revenue or net revenue has nothing to do with this program. It's all about salary and compensation.
Okay. So if you take that compensation, I'm sorry, just one more, just so I can clarify. If you take that compensation as a one-time payment at the end of every year, if it's still compensation, that would be used. They'd still use that to calculate, correct?
Well, the guidance is currently that you would use the average of the 2019 expense. So what I would say is that you could, obviously, regardless of whether it's paid in January, June, or December, that you're going to have a total, and you're going to take the average. The question is, how would you justify your expense existing in May or June, which would be the forgiveness review period, if you didn't have payroll in May or June of 2020. So I would say that you'd probably need to start changing your thoughts on when you paid payroll to make sure you had payroll costs in May or June, because we would expect that you would need to submit quarterly returns or some other substantiation to justify that you did in fact have payroll costs during the forgiveness window.
Okay. Okay, good. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Please continue. I know that we've been at it for a while, so.
So this slide, again, I think this slide here, everyone can see what they're talking about, is being included in the amounts, and what the expenses can be paid to cover. So obviously the payroll costs that we talked about, the healthcare benefits, salaries, commissions, payments of interest on mortgage obligations, rent payments, utilities. So these are all the things that can be used to request to request cancellation of the debt, okay? Again, the forgiveness and deficit is forgiven on an amount equal to the costs incurred during the covered period, March 1 through June 30th for those various costs. Any forgiven debt is not included in income. So again, for that example I threw out there, the $250,000, if you could substantiate all 250, or if you could substantiate 200 of that, and it's forgiven, there is no there is no income to recognize, which is amazing. They're not requiring businesses to recognize that essential grant or free income as taxable income, which is amazing. The other factor of this is, again, the intent of this program is to allow businesses to sustain their staffing levels, so businesses don't have to lay off employees. So there is a provision of this program that says, listen, the point of this is for you to maintain your head counts. So if you had 10 employees last year, at the same time, we want you to maintain that same level this year. Or you could use these alternate windows, which is January to February, as outlined in the chart above. If you were to fall off, if headcount were to go down, your forgiveness ratio would also go down. So if you went down from 10 employees to 7 for that forgiveness window, then only 70% of the loan could be forgiven. So that is the intent of this whole program, is to maintain employee headcount. And that's the ultimate goal of this. So that's something you have to, be mindful of. And also, as you apply for the program, you want to make sure you select the period that is best, a better fit for you. If you were heavily staffed last year between February 15th and June 30th of 19, and you had 15 people at your firm, and for whatever reason you downsized to 10, well, you wouldn't want to use that window as your base. You'd want to use the January 1st to February 29th as your base, right? So the idea is that you'd want your base FTE equivalent to be the lower of the two options, so you only have to meet that lower threshold to get 100% cancellation. And again, as with anything else, whenever there's a great opportunity, there's opportunities for abuse. So, the language associated with this loan says the loan is needed to continue operations during COVID-19 emergency. So, that is the basic language. As you apply, you would need to certify that to be the case. And, some professionals are taking an approach or a view on this that this is needed to keep the doors open. I think the majority of the opinions are this is what's needed to keep businesses on track with where they were, because again, the intent was to not have to lay off employees for whatever reason. Sales are down, cash flow is bad, whatever it is, this is meant to assist employees to continue operations as they were prior to the COVID-19 emergency.
And just a couple of questions that came up is the one was, you have more employees in 2020 than you had in 19. Can that increase your loan amount request?
No, the loan amount request is based on your 19 payroll, unless you're a new business that started in 20. So you would your limitation on the loan amount, it would be based on that 19 average monthly.
Okay. Okay, good.
All right, and the current slide, again, this is talking about, I guess, that longer list of information being requested by some banks. I think as a precaution, they're trying to kind of get more than what they need. So here's that long list of what some banks may be asking for, although we're getting some indications that all this information won't be needed for the PPP, that this is more of a list associated to the traditional SBA loan programs or the EIDL program. Again, this is one of that longer checklist. We're not sure we don't believe will all be needed for the PPP. It would be needed for the EIDL. but this is something that if you wanted to start getting ahead of things and getting a jump on, you could use. This would be I guess the most you would possibly need, but maybe you could avoid this. Again, I would check with your lenders on that. Let's see. Seems like I'm stuck for some reason. So
we
I
lost
think
you.
we're near the end. For whatever reason, my computer seems to have frozen. I'll have to get out on that as soon as we get off the presentation.
we lost your screen there, John. Yeah, I hear you though. Not a worry. Just a couple of quick questions, and then we lost your screen, so I'll sort of do a closing for you if that's okay with you. Jacqueline had said that she heard from various sources that a trailing 12-month payroll would be used versus a full calendar year. So can you just confirm again it's for what the total year's payroll was? Is that what you're talking about? John, did we lose you fully? I think we lost John fully. He's on mute. He may be. Let me see if I can unmute him. John, you there?
I can hear you, Al. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. So for some reason you landed on mute. So Jacqueline had a question about the 12-month payroll. Would it be a trailing 12 or just the full calendar year of 2019?
Well, the initial interpretation was a trailing 12 from date of loan, which in theory would be April 19th to March 31st. However, recent guidance, including the second page of the PPP application, indicates that it's based on a 2019 calendar year.
Okay, and the guidance takes precedence. So that would be for the 2019 calendar year, Jacqueline. And so Anita asked something about getting the checklist and the application. John's going to be sharing that, and so he's going to send that over, and then we'll send it to everybody who's attended the webinar. So you'll have the application. And just to confirm, John, the application's opening date or enrollment date is tomorrow. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. Tomorrow for businesses, think of it as businesses with employees, is tomorrow. Sole proprietors, contractors is April 10th.
Okay, and then obviously it's a limited pool of capital, and so it's first come, first serve. So everybody, at least on this call, should make sure they get their application in tomorrow or as quickly as thereafter as possible.
Right. And even for the self-employed and contractors, I mean, I'd reach out to your banks, find your bank, locate who you'll be processing with. Find out what their current list of demands is. I would do that, even though those dates may be April 10th, I would start lining things up and getting ready to enter the process and getting on the queue. The banks are overwhelmed. Again, they're not really thrilled about this. So, I don't, their capacity, like all of us working from home, their capacity is reduced. So, it's challenging times for all. So sooner is better than later. There's no question.
Okay, and because you lost video there, I've put it in the chat to everybody who's attended. So make sure that you check the chat. John's contact information, his email address is in there, his name and company and title I'm finishing that now. So his information is in there. He's generously offered to answer any questions you have. Just be patient. It may take him some time because he does have work to do to earn his day-to-day, so to speak. I don't know if there's any other questions that came in. I think that is about it. I don't really see anything else. Oh, you're back. Okay, you're back, and there's your contact information. Good. I typed
right.
making me typed, John. I'm gonna have to take that out on your hide there.
And just kind of quickly wrapping up. I mean, this is the application form. It's a one pager. You can see how simple it is. Average monthly payroll X times 2.5 equals the loan amount. Number of jobs. You have to identify your head count. And then, make some certain certifications, and it's relatively straightforward. The tricky part is really coming up with that average monthly payroll number. And again, we don't know what the forgiveness request process is going to look like. I'm guessing that'll be a lot more difficult. Obviously, their goal is to get the money out where it needs to be, and I'm sure they're still working on the process. Who's going to review expenses, requests for forgiveness, what type of information will be needed. We're assuming it's going to be, obviously copies of payroll reports, copies of rent checks, copies of leases. But, again, that process and those details will come later. For now, this is all we have is a simple, you're seeing one page, there's a second page, but there's just some additional certifications on the second page. So there's very little to the initial application process. So, hopefully it's something that everyone can streamline and benefit from.
Okay, yeah, it looks straightforward. It doesn't look like there's really any collateral or anything collateral either in support of the amount or other documentation that's terribly onerous here, unless of course, as you said, the bank is requiring that.
Right. So those details are going to the bank, and our banks that we're communicating with several banks, and they're all getting different information. They're all communicating different substantiation requests, and we don't know if they're, again, relying on your basic checklist that has existed prior to this issue, or if they're getting good information from SBA. So those, they vary significantly between send us copies of your quarterly payroll tax returns, which we could all do in 10 or 15 minutes, to obviously here's the checklist, 20 different items that, might take a, good amount of time to pull together.
Okay, so the long and short of it is contact your lender to see if there are any other requirements beyond what's on this application.
Correct.
Okay. All right,
I
great.
understand that some lenders are trying to establish an online-only process. We've heard of that from Chase and Bank of America. They're trying to get this program all online, where I guess you would, apply and possibly submit any required substantiation through their website as opposed to dealing with the bank. But I would start with reaching out to whoever your bank contact is and trying to get some information from them.
Okay, terrific. See if there's anything else in here. Any other questions? Just jump down to your contact page if you would, John, in case anybody didn't get that. While I look for any other questions, just bear with me. Kevin asked if federal taxes are included in the PPP. So when you're calculating pay, no, okay.
No, they're not. Just all state unemployment insurance only.
Okay, state taxes and unemployment insurance only.
Right. Workers' comp is also is considered an employee benefit. So again, health insurance, dental insurance, retirement, and you can include workers' comp premiums.
Okay. That's good to know.
Total.
Okay. Let me see a few others. Do the employer who gets K-1 and has employees apply at the same time? I'm not sure what that question is. So assuming if the employer gets a K-1 and he has employees, the amount on the K-1 that flows through plus the employees make up what the payroll is, correct?
I'm not sure I'm following that question. If the employer gets a K-1, I mean, an employer wouldn't get a K-1. A business would issue a K-1 to a partner of the business.
Yeah, I think that's what that is. So
right. So if you had a situation where you're a partnership with salaried employees, and then obviously you've got to compute the payroll cost of the salaried employees up to the $100,000 each. And for the various partners of the firm, you can include them in the calculation up to $100,000 each of their share of the self-employment income of the business. So again, simple example, if you had a two-person partnership that did have $500,000 employment income, partners are 50-50, each partner is allocated $250,000 of self-employment income each to report, then they would count $100,000 each for each partner as eligible salary, plus do whatever they come up with for their employees.
Okay. And then just in terms of what we do for a living, since some of our clients are on this call and want to know, would computer services would constitute a utility? And you better say yes, John. That's all I have to say.
I would check with your tax advisor. Let's say that. I would say no. You know, I don't see a connection between computer consulting and utility. Obviously, internet services are, but I don't see. I mean, just like legal or professional services aren't a utility, I'm not sure how you would connect computer consulting to that.
Okay.
You know, certainly, you know, I don't. That does not fall within the how they're defining utilities. It's basic traditional utilities.
Okay. Okay, got it. I think that is about it. Last question for you, John. Would you make this presentation available, and if so, if you could send that to me?
Sure, that's fine.
Okay. So, Jacqueline, yes, John's going to make it available, and so he'll send that to me. I will send a link to the recording. This has been recorded. Is still being recorded, and I will post that and send a link to all attendees, along with a copy of John's presentation and the form to fill out. Or John will put that up on one of his secure shared file to download, whichever he wants to do. Great. I appreciate John very much for joining us today. I think you helped a lot of people get a better understanding of what the government's doing, at least on the immediate front with the Paycheck Protection Program. I think everybody understands that there's an urgency to getting their paperwork in order and getting the application filed, and importantly, it's important to ask their lenders and shop around at lenders to make sure that you're going with one that will make the barrier to entry as de minimis as possible. Mm-hmm. So thanks again, John. Appreciate it a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Al. Thanks for it.
All right. On Tuesday, we're going to be doing a webinar on securing your home-based workstation. At the end of that, we have a vendor who's provided us some free utilities that we're going to pass on to you. Next Thursday, we're going to have an insurance company on to talk about what to consider when you have employees working from home, what you need to be concerned about, what may or may not be covered, what to be on the lookout in the current policies you have. We do have it's done by an insurance company, not an insurance agency. So these are the people who actually underwrite those insurance policies. They'll have a lot of good information. I'd strongly encourage you all to join in on that. John may also join in on that because John's firm is also a client of ours. And also that will be sponsored by a broker, but it'll be a great opportunity for you to know what or who is covered and what you need to be on the lookout for your employees. I want to thank everybody for joining us. You'll get a reminder on next week's webinar, and we look forward to seeing everybody. Thanks all. I hope we found it informative. Bye, John.
Bye. Bye, Al.